China to become carbon neutral by 2050 and maintain its carbon neutrality through 2100, it will cost China $1 trillion a year. China's not spending $1 trillion a year. China, in fact, has increased its carbon emissions 300% by 1990. Russia, he thinks that Russia needs to start spending today $400 to $500 billion a year. Does anyone in this room honestly believe that President Putin tomorrow is going to stand up and say, well, I'm going to stop spending money on my military and start spending it on CO2 emissions? And I think that needs to be addressed head on, and I think you're the person to do it. I don't know if the White House will let you, but the world is yearning for this.
In a committee hearing, Senator criticized the administration's energy policies. He questioned the halt on LNG permits and lack of focus on nuclear energy. The senator urged clearer communication with the public about the costs and benefits of these decisions. Referencing economist Dr. Lomborg, he highlighted the hefty price tag of global carbon neutrality. Concerns were raised about China and Russia's cooperation in climate efforts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Secretary and Madam Secretary, for being here. I want to apologize in advance. I've got a couple of other committees going, so I'm going to be in and out. I'd like to hear you talk today about a couple of things. First, Madam Secretary, I'm very disappointed in the administration's decision to place a moratorium on LNG permits. I don't see how that is going to further the goal of climate change. I do see how that is going to hurt America's energy independence, but equally important, it's going to hurt our friends in Europe. It's going to help our enemies, like Qatar. It looks political to me, and I'm hoping you'll be able to address that. I'd also like to talk today about whether the administration would consider, so far it hasn't, it's considered it, but it hasn't done it, advancing petroleum pit production. We've done better, but it's still not enough. I'm disappointed that the administration hasn't emphasized nuclear energy funding. I don't understand how we're going to achieve carbon neutrality without advanced small modular nuclear reactors. And the administration doesn't seem to want to talk too much about the benefits. Of course, there are costs as well, but the benefits of nuclear energy. It seems to have worked out well in countries like France, which sees its energy future, including a big role for nuclear energy. So those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we can talk about today. But I want to end my remarks, Secretary Granholm, with a more general thought. I consider you to be one of the most intelligent and accomplished appointees by President Biden. That doesn't mean I agree with all of the positions that you have taken. I don't know to what extent you have taken those positions because you believe them or because you have been directed to take them by the White House. But I also feel like in our debate over energy transition, we're missing a major piece of the puzzle. And that's an explanation to the American people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, the costs of doing it, and the benefits and the trade-offs. And I think you and your department should take on that responsibility. Let me try to be more specific. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bjorn Lomborg. I'm not saying that he has all the answers, but he is a visiting professor at Stanford. He's head of a think tank in Europe called the Copenhagen Consensus. He is basically a climate change economist. And in peer-reviewed studies, he predicts, for example, that in order for us to be carbon neutral, and not just the United States and the world, by 2050, and to maintain it through 2100, it will cost about 1% of the world's, not America's, but the world's GDP. Well, that doesn't sound like much until you reduce it to raw dollars. That's $27 trillion a year. That's the cost. He raises the question of whether we should spend that $27 trillion or take a portion of it and instead use it to combat the effects of climate change, which he estimates we could do successfully worldwide for $1 trillion a year. Now, you may not agree with his numbers or his analysis, but a cost-benefit analysis is worth pursuing instead of just throwing a bunch of money at the problem. For example, he raises the question, he believes that in order for China to become carbon neutral by 2050 and maintain its carbon neutrality through 2100, it will cost China $1 trillion a year. China's not spending $1 trillion a year. China, in fact, has increased its carbon emissions 300% by 1990. He raises the question, it's a fair question, what happens if China doesn't cooperate? What's the impact on world carbon neutrality? If it doesn't cooperate, is America wasting all its money? He raises the question about Russia. He thinks that Russia needs to start spending today $400 to $500 billion a year and spend that amount every year between now and 2100 to achieve carbon neutrality. It's about 3 times what Russia spends on its military. Does anyone in this room honestly believe that President Putin tomorrow is going to stand up and say, well, I'm going to stop spending money on my military and start spending it on CO2 emissions? And Professor Lomborg raises the question of, well, what happens if they don't? What happens if India doesn't cooperate? Developing countries, they want the same things as us. They want to be able to eat and live indoors, and their children to have better lives. Are we going to have to pay developing countries for their energy transition, particularly when it's cheaper for them to advance their societies using fossil fuels? These are the kind of questions that need to be hit head on, and we're not doing it. And this administration, with all due respect, has not done it. All we're doing is throwing money at a problem. And I asked, I think it was your deputy secretary, Madam Secretary, about a year or so ago, I said, if the United States government achieves carbon neutrality by 2050, and we spend the money to do it, how much will that lower world temperatures? Or how much will that decrease the increase in world temperatures? He said, I can't guarantee you that it'll lower temperatures at all, because it depends on other countries. And I think that needs to be addressed head on, and I think you're the person to do it. I don't know if the White House will let you, but the world is yearning for this. I'm going on too long. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but people are starting to figure out that they're going to have to pay for this. We see it in Germany right now. I mean, Germany said, well, we're just going to require everybody to convert to heat pumps. Now, all of a sudden, people say, well, you mean I've got to go buy a $15,000 heat pump? And so they're pushing back. And in order to have people buy into an energy transition, they've got to understand that there's an overarching plan. I'm sorry for going on so long, Madam Chair.
No.